Welcome to my review for Maniac Cop 3 Badge of Silence, the concluding part of the Maniac Cop trilogy, although in all honesty the story for this was neatly wrapped up after a couple of movies. We didn't really need a third go around with Cordell other than for the sake of enjoying one more sequel with him. I mean, he's actually dead at the start of this film. This random priest brings him back to life, a character we've not previously seen up to this point. Also, we've not had anything supernatural in the franchise up until now, but now it's suddenly possible to bring people back from the dead, and it's using some of that silly movie mumbo jumbo, you know, kind of randomly bring somebody back to life. You know, Charles Lee Ray was doing it at the start of Child's Play. You might as well say in the script for these things, just ad-lib a load of random crap and we'll try and sell it as an incantation. Maka, paka, waka, blah. So Cordell comes back, he wakes up at the same graveyard where he was buried, and yet he magically knows who resurrected him and where to go to find him. So what's his motivation going to be for this film? Because the priest who resurrects him doesn't need him for anything, he just brought him back because. But luckily, the same night that he comes back to life, there's this young female police officer, Katie Sullivan, who is being rushed to hospital with gunshot wounds because she tried to stop this convenience store robbery and things sort of went wrong for her at the last minute. She did this completely by the book. She went about things totally the right way as a police officer, and yet the media misreport it and try and claim that she shot first and asked questions later and was a bit of a vigilante in the whole affair. Not true. But Cordell hears on the radio the story that's put out, and he identifies in Sullivan a sort of kindred spirit, he'd like to know, someone who just gets the job done regardless of the rules. I guess, I don't know. So he seeks her out, or tries to seek her out in the hospital where she's currently in a coma, and it's just a bit stupid. I mean, what's the point of this? What is he hoping to achieve? Is he just going to bring her out and they're going to form a tag team out on the streets of New York? Is he just going to try and have her as his girlfriend? It's not really clear what he wants to do. I mean, the first two movies, as despicable a character as Cordell was, we could at least understand his motivations and feel some sympathy for him as he went after the police commissioner and the criminals in Sing Sing. But in this film, the plot is just silly. I mean, it's pointless. It doesn't make any sense. It's unclear. And I've not even got to the worst part, okay? So you've got Cordell temporarily hanging out in this church with this priest guy, and then you've got Katie O'Sullivan in this hospital in a coma. Now, out of all the thousands of buildings in New York City, these two buildings just happen to be connected by this random tunnel. I call it a magic movie tunnel. There's no reason for this tunnel to exist other than the fact that it's convenient for this movie. It's totally stupid. It's ridiculous. But once you get past how stupid the plot is for this film and the daft logic with the magic movie tunnel, it's a really enjoyable movie. I am never bored when I'm watching the 86 or 90 minutes or whatever it is in this film. It's really entertaining. It's still fun seeing Cordell stalk around looking for victims. At least half of this film takes place in a hospital as he tries to get to the wing where Sullivan is. So it's sort of like the Maniac Cop version of Halloween 2 in a way, except that this one's in a city rather than a small town, and this hospital feels a bit more populated, which is both a good and a bad thing. We get some good kills because, you know, he gets a chance to use some hospital equipment to kill people. So he uses an X-ray machine to kill one guy. Another kill involves these, you know, those electric things that used to resuscitate people. You know, like in John Carpenter's The Thing, where the doctor puts his hands through the body and he gets his hands cut off. Well, he gets to use those. Best kill of all, though, is outside the hospital, I think quite early on, where he's just looking up at the place. And this random Muppet comes up behind Cordell and goes, "Ha, I think this is where the vigilante cop's being held. It's like the Wild West out there, man." Or something like that. And Cordell just grabs him, throws him in the air and goes, shoots him out of the air with his gun. It's just like as if he's like literally in the Wild West and somebody's chucked a hat in the air and challenged a gunslinger to shoot the hat out of the air. It's just absolutely crazy. But I really enjoyed that kill. I really did. Now Robert Davi is back again, and I think it's a good thing he did because he adds some real credibility to this film. I mean, I just don't think this film would have much standing in the horror world at all if Davi hadn't at least come back, you know. And his McKinney character is actually possibly cooler in this film than he was in the previous one. I mean, as great as he was in number 2, he didn't actually have much to do. You know, he didn't even get involved with the finale, which was one of my criticisms of that movie. But he's involved in the finale this time. He gets to have it out with Cordell. And he also gets this great scene in the hospital where he puts himself on this gurney, lies down, covers himself with a sheet, and pushes the gurney down this hospital corridor, and there's these three perps at the end, armed to the teeth, and as the gurney's rolling and they're kind of like, oh, what's that? He sort of starts shooting through the cloth. It's a really cool scene. He even gets a love interest in this movie. Claudia Christensen is sadly not coming back, but there's this doctor, I believe played by Caitlin Delaney, and she's playing a character called Susan, and she just happens to be this hot 30-year-old doctor who's single. She's got long blonde hair. When she sits down in a hospital gown, you can see her legs going all the way up to her thigh. You know, should we call it a magic movie doctor? You know, but it's nice to see McKinney get with somebody, and there's no corny sex scene or anything like that, but they slowly get closer throughout the film, and at the end it's sort of implied as they're walking off that they're going to be a couple now, and I think that's a nice way to sort of round out the trilogy, I think, with, you know, McKinney getting some happiness, because we find out in the second film that he got divorced at some point because of his job. Now, I went through most of the negatives at the start, talking about the plot. One more thing I would say is that there are some reused ideas and locations in this film which just smack of laziness, or maybe it was just a budgetary thing. You know, one thing I talked about a lot in my first two reviews was this incredible flashback scene where Cordell's reliving being sent down, walking into the prison for the first time at Sing Sing, getting attacked in the showers, and there was this eerie soundtrack that played over all that. It was brilliant. It played again in the second film. In the third film, they play it again, except it's a much shorter version this time, but it doesn't have the music, so it's just nowhere near as good to watch the third time around. Also, thematically, we didn't need it the third time around. This film has nothing to do with his pursuit of the criminals or the judges or whoever. I mean, if anything, if there was going to be a flashback, it maybe needed to be one of him hanging out with that crippled woman from the first film, because he's seeking out Katie Sullivan in this film, possibly in a romantic sense, so wouldn't he look back with a bit of guilt towards that previous relationship? That would make sense. But it would also mean filming new footage, which I'm guessing wasn't what they wanted to do. They just wanted to shovel in the old same clip that they'd been using the first two times around. So, I don't know. Now, I'll give you a quick anecdote about when I first watched Maniac Cop 3. I was 13. I think it was literally the same year the movie came out. I rented this just after it hit the shelves. I'd watched all three movies that same year. And the night that I rented number 3 out, my dad was going out, so I was in the flat where we lived, and he got a babysitter around for me, my cousin. Probably one of the last times I needed a babysitter because I was 13, but he came around and he brought some mates with him and girlfriends, and there were like 4 or 5 of them. They were all kind of like 19, 20. I was just 13 watching this film. The only VHS player was in the sitting room, so I had to watch the movie with all these 4 random adults sat in the same room who never heard of Maniac Cop before, didn't even like horror movies, and as I was watching it, they were just taking the piss out of it the whole time, and being a teenager, I was secretly thinking, shut up, this is serious business. So yeah, that was kind of annoying, and I've just watched it again for the second time now, like 25 years after the first time around. I don't think I've watched it again as an adult. I would have remembered the Magic Movie Tunnel, I'm sure, so it's been a real pleasure to watch it again as like a 40-year-old now. It's such an entertaining film. It's flawed and it's got some stupid things with the plot, like I've been explaining, but it's still really, really good. So let's get to the Bag of Terror. So we've got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes. That's my score for Maniac Cop 3 Badge of Silence. 3 bloody axes out of 5. I'll quickly give you my final thoughts on this trilogy. It's been a real pleasure to go back and review it. I think the second film is definitely the best one. The third film is probably just about the worst. Although, having said that, Badge of Silence is probably more entertaining, I think, than the first movie. But the first movie is just a more credible story. It doesn't have the plot holes and flaws and things that don't make any sense. It's probably the one out of the trilogy that's more a horror film than the others. The number 2 and 3 are more like an action horror with a big emphasis on action. But overall, I think it's a very consistent trilogy. I've given good scores to all 3 movies, and I really hope one day they bring out a decent sort of Blu-ray release for these films, because they're really hard to get hold of, certainly in the UK. I mean, it's possible on eBay to buy overpriced versions from Europe and you know, hunt out the right audio track once you've got them, but even so, they're not great as it stands. You sort of have to watch them on streaming services and things like that. If you've never seen any of these films, absolutely go and try them out. Though I imagine if you're watching the back end of the Maniac Cop 3 review, then you've got some experience with watching them. So I'll leave it there for today. I will be back to do a review of the Maniac Cop TV series if it goes ahead. It's kind of been put on hold, I think, because of COVID, but we'll see how that goes. But until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.